No magic there. If you said, how would greatness live today? What would love look like today? What would be a greater expression of myself in the things that I do? Turns out if you close your eyes and you rehearse in your mind how you're going to be.
A person wakes up in the morning and the brain is a record of the past. The first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is they start thinking about their problems. And those problems are memories that are etched in the brain that are connected to certain people, certain objects, certain things at certain times and places. So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, the moment you think about your problems, you're thinking in the past, right? Mm-hmm. Now, every one of those problems has an emotion associated with them because we've experienced them. So the moment you remember your problems, now you feel unhappy, now you feel anxious, now you feel fear. So the moment we feel those emotions, it takes a thought and a feeling, a memory or an image and an emotion, a stimulus and a response, and we start conditioning the body emotionally into the past. Now the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person's fabricating by thought alone. The body's believing it's in that environmental condition. So if the environment signals the gene, and that's the truth, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, we're signaling the same genes, and genes make proteins. And if you keep signaling the same genes, you start down-regulating the gene to make cheaper proteins, and the body begins to break down. Now, that's an unconscious process. So what goes along with that is the moment the person feels that emotion of unhappiness or whatever it is, the brain checks in with the body and says, yeah, you're feeling pretty miserable, you're suffering. And we tend to generate more thoughts equal to the feeling that we have. The hormones of stress actually heighten the senses and cause us to become materialists. So matter is the issue when there's survival. It's whatever's around the corner. It's whatever's going to happen. So we said, okay, let's teach people something else. Let's teach them how to broaden their focus. Mm-hmm. And as they broaden their focus and take their attention off of everything material and everything known and focus on space, focus on nothing, the act of doing that actually starts slowing down the analytical mind. You can't analyze when you're sensing. And it starts to change the person's brainwaves into a slower brainwave pattern. Right. And so now as you start slowing your brainwaves from that high beta, you start slowing down, you're shifting gears, you go into a mid-range beta, then you go into a low-level beta, and then all of a sudden you get into alpha. Now alpha, when you're in alpha, the voice in your head, the critic in your mind goes away. That voice that's talking to you stops, and the brain tends to see in images, in pictures. That's the imaginary state, that's the creative state. And in alpha, when you're out of survival, you're looking for answers, you're creative, you're looking for new ways of doing things. So when they broaden their focus, not only do they move into alpha, but all of a sudden we start seeing those different compartments of the brain that were once subdivided. All of a sudden starting to unify. Different communities of neurons that were fragmented start to synchronize.
And that's what you call coherence.
Right, so what syncs in the brain, links in the brain. So when you see the front of the brain talking to the back of the brain, the right side of the brain talking to the left side of the brain, you start knowing something good is starting to happen and the person's starting to create more order. So when you see those psychic union of two hemispheres coming together, you know, the polarity, that person starts to feel incredibly whole. And coherence, when you have waves that are coherent, when they build or interfere with each other, their waves get bigger. And the higher the amplitude of the wave, the higher the energy in the brain. And all of a sudden, the person starts to become very relaxed and no longer stressed in a program, and kind of alert and awake.
No magic there. If you said, how would greatness live today? What would love look like today? What would be a greater expression of myself in the things that I do? Turns out if you close your eyes and you rehearse in your mind how you're going to be in any aspect of your day, if you're truly present, the brain doesn't know the difference between the inward experience of what you're imagining and the outer real experience. The brain looks like you've already done it. The brain looks like it's already experienced it. Now, do that enough times, the hardware becomes a software program and you start behaving like a different person.
Super athletes do this all the time.
This is musicians, athletes, dancers, everybody who's good at something is always rehearsing in their mind. that rehearsal is just as important as the physical demonstration. It's priming the brain, because the brain is a record of the past. Now you're actually making it a map to the future. You're installing circuits to use.
Most people's entire state of being when they start their day is in the familiar past. Well, if you live in the familiar past, then it makes sense you're going to create the predictable future. So what happens for most people is they get stuck in their biology. So think about this. Your body is your unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between an experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can create by thought alone. So if you're living by the same emotion every single day and those emotions are influencing your thoughts, and you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, you're thinking in the past. Your lens of the future is going to be colored by the past, so you can't see possibilities. So most people like to wait for crisis or disease or diagnosis before they wake up enough to see. Well, the challenge is that biology tends to be redundant. So if you keep thinking the same thoughts, and those thoughts begin to fire certain circuits in your brain, the nerve cells that fire together wire together, so all of a sudden you start getting hardwired, and those are the thoughts that you can think the easiest. At the same time, those thoughts produce chemicals called emotions, and the next thing you know, your body gets accustomed to living by the same emotions, and it could be guilt, it could be unhappiness, it could be pain, but at least it's familiar to you, at least you can predict it. So some people would rather cling to the familiar than take a chance in possibility. So for most people then, they say, well, I don't really see how my thoughts have anything to do with my destiny. Well, that's because 95% of those thoughts are subconscious programs, right? So you're not even conscious that you think those thoughts. So the first step to change is starting to think about what you've been thinking about and change it. And then when you begin to observe those thoughts, you're no longer the program, you're the consciousness observing the program.
Just simply by being an observer of your thoughts.
Right. So most people, though, when you do that, when you decide to really take a look, it's like lighting a match in a dark place. So you feel uncomfortable. So it's easier to turn on your TV, it's easier to play with your cell phone, to distract yourself from those feelings. Well, when you understand that change really requires becoming uncomfortable to a certain degree, and that's normal, that you're leaving the known and you're stepping into the unknown, then it begs the question, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? Because your attention on those thoughts begins to reorganize circuitry, remold the brain.